In late January we gave the bus a final scrub and headed off for what we planned to be 3 to 4 months in the South Island. We'd been down many times before, but not for an extended period.
We caught the 2 AM ferry. That was the only ferry we could get, even booking a month in advance, but it didn't bother us. We were happy to go then.
We spent some time at Waterlea Racecourse in Blenheim to repair our failed water pump, and then we headed off for Golden Bay. At Motorhome we spent a day or two at the Big Shed Pop and enjoyed some cycling around the area. Then it was over the Takaka Hills, a night at Collingwood, then round the Wanganui Harbour and out to Patarau. This became one of our favourite spots, an awesome freedom camping site. A week of freedom camping at its best.
From Patarau we went back to Collingwood and stayed at the Collingwood Motor Camp, which is really lovely. We then went on to Tirakoe and stayed at the NZMCA, another really lovely camp, and on to Tautranui Dock Camp where we stayed for about a week. It was a very busy camp, being right on the Abel Tasman walkway, and where we parked we had lots of hikers and trampers going past. We spent lots of time in and on the water. It was a neat week.
From Tautranui we headed back down to explore Mapua, Motueka and some time at Kinna Bay, a lovely part of the country. Nelson Lakes is a lovely spot to spend some time. Here we're at Lake Rotorua, where we spent quite a bit of time paddleboarding and kayaking and just generally enjoying the warm sunny weather. We timed our visit to coincide with the 2023 Vintage and Classic Boat Show at Lake Rotoiti. A really neat weekend. We worked our way on down towards Christchurch, where we spent a great few days with our son Logan and his fiancée Jazz. It was soon time to fill the tanks and travel further south.
From Waitaki we biked a little of the Alps to Ocean bike trail. We enjoyed a nice coffee at Kurau before heading on back. After our time on the Waitaki River, we spent a few nights at Omarama. We travelled up alongside Lake Pukeki and up to Mount Cook, Aoraki, something that we had never done before. It was absolutely breathtaking.
Our next stop was Lake Poaka, where we enjoyed the last of the summer weather and some lovely kayaking on the lake. Absolutely beautiful day. Next morning, Rel awoke feeling ghastly, and a positive COVID test soon followed. It was only another 24 hours and I joined her. And the weather changed to freezing conditions as well, -2 at one point. So we had a rather sad week at Lake Poaka.
After a few days rest, it was a refresh in Timaru and we were on the road again. We met Logan and Jazz and his kids at Kakanui Motor Camp at Easter, and had a really wonderful time. It was great to see the grandkids again.
We'd stayed at Dunedin previously, so we opted for a couple of days at Portobello on the Otago Peninsula. By now I'd injured my shoulder, so there was to be no more biking or kayaking this trip. A German tourist suggested we visit Tunnel Beach. He did say it was a bit of a walk, but we were quite surprised just how steep it was. We continued south via Kuri Bush and on to the Catlins, where we stayed at the Kaka Point motor camp. We needed to stay in a camp because we were struggling with low solar hours and our batteries were not quite keeping up. It was sad to see the scow Portland, built in 1910, sitting on the bottom and slowly rotting. Next stop was Invercargill. Time to get the bus cleaned, replace the windscreen which we'd cracked several months before, and get ready for a COF. Although our coaster is nearly 30 years old, she's always been really reliable for the 6 years we've owned her and never had much problem with COFs. She failed terribly. We had 3 days work to do and had to find somewhere to stay and a rental car to get us by. We arranged a cottage at Lawnville and Southern Mechanical Services did a great job of getting the work done quickly. We enjoyed our time seeing all the sights that we'd wanted to around Invercargill. We also bought a small generator via TradeMe so we could keep our house batteries topped up. This was a great decision. Soon we were all sorted, somewhat lighter in the pocket, and back on the road again. A visit to Cozy Nook and a few days at Monkey Island completed our time on the south coast, and we started to make our way north again. As we headed inland towards Manapuri, the temperature dropped significantly. We had a nice stay at NZMCA Manapuri, and it was great to see the Kiwi power arrangement in practice. Works very well. The road to Mavora Lakes was thickly surrounded by snow. There'd been a large dump a couple of days before, and the grader had been through, leaving a good track, but otherwise it was such a beautiful sight. North Mavora was one of the most picturesque places we've ever stayed. Absolutely idyllic. Leaving Mavora Lakes, we headed down to Lumsden for the night. This town has really gone to the trouble of making motorhomers feel welcome. Down the road a bit, we tripped over the Croydon Aviation Heritage Centre, and one of the things I've always wanted to do was go for a ride in a tiger moth. With Rel's encouragement, I was soon in the air, weaving our way over Southland. What a beautiful day for flying.
It was just down the road to Gore, where we stayed at the AMP showgrounds for a few days. Also caught up with our friends the Barclays, who we hadn't seen in person for 25 years.
Another highlight of our trip was stopping at the Tuapeka Mouth Ferry. This had been operating for around 100 years and is the last of the punt-type ferries left in the country. There used to be about 15 on the Clutha River itself. Just the flow of water coming down the river operates the ferry, which runs across on wires from one side to the other. The ferry is free to ride, and puntmaster Tom Jones is happy to come across and take you for a ride at any time during operating hours.
It's also nice to walk around their old village, and there's camping on either side of the river.
At Pinder's Pond, we found the couple next to us were also from New Plymouth. Isn't it funny how you have to go to the opposite end of the country to make friends who live just down the road?
There's a lot of talk about who has the best pies in New Zealand. In our travels, we found Jimmy's at Roxburgh, the absolute tops. After a few more stops, we were going to go to the Haast Pass and head up on to the west coast, but had an emergency call to go to Christchurch again. A bonus was catching up with our new friends Lance and Suzanne at Earling NZMCA camp. Emergency over, and after helping the kids shift house, we were on our way again.
We headed over Arthur's Pass and stopped the night at Lake Pearson. Next morning we woke to a beautiful hoar frost. Initially our pipes were frozen and we had no water, and as our batteries were lithium they were quite happy but would not accept a charge until the temperature rose about 5 degrees.
We went for a walk in the beautiful Hokitika Gorge. It's an easy loop track walk with 2 modern swing bridges. The water is absolutely magnificent, being a beautiful aqua colour.
Lake Mahunipua did not disappoint and produced some of those stunning reflections that the South Island lakes are known for. At Charleston we freedom camped at Little Beach, a spot we had entirely to ourselves. We walked up to the old Charleston Cemetery on Nile Hill. Quite a sobering experience seeing the young age of so many of the graves. Along the coast and just below Westport lies the Cape Foulwind Lighthouse. After a wander up the track to get a closer view of the lighthouse, we moved on to Westport and made it our base for a few days. As the weather had closed in, we went and visited the Coal Town Museum. The museum holds a lot of mining history, as well as from the port of Westport. This old engine from an early dredge is very similar to one I actually operated in my early days as an engineer. A trip to the west coast wouldn't be complete without a visit to the top of the Denniston Incline. This is an amazing piece of engineering history and transported over 13.5 million tonnes of coal in the 88 years it ran. We freedom camped on the plateau for a couple of nights and managed to see just about all 4 seasons of the weather. Next we headed off to Murchison and started our trip across the country on our way home. From Murchison on to Blenheim, where we enjoyed the Marlborough Farmers Market. It's on every Sunday morning from 9 till 12 at the A&P Showgrounds. With only a week or so left before we were due to catch the ferry, we headed out to Marfells Beach to enjoy the forecast good weather. The tame pheasants made the most of any crumbs that we could spare them. It's hard to imagine that when we visited before the earthquake, there was virtually no beach here at all. Obviously, to fit all this into 15 minutes, we've had to miss out quite a few spots. Also, lots of Rel's lovely cooking and all the exciting tours that are part of day-to-day life and life on the road. But it certainly has been a most magnificent 6 months.